we're going to get started, and we're so happy to have Katrina McKay of UpLevel Solutions. I've known Katrina for many years, but I don't know very much about UpLevel, and I'm getting to the point in my business, as everyone knows, where I desperately need a VA. So this was excellent timing. I know a bunch of us are. Katrina, feel free to tell us anything about yourself or start your presentation. Then we'll do Q&A after.
Thanks so much for having me, first of all. I've heard so many great things about this group, and I'm delighted to be an honorary or temporary member for the day. That's really special. I love what you're doing, Daniela. I think this is such a brilliant program and a brilliant community, and much needed. I actually started in the arts, and so I know you've got a lot of folks who have similar backgrounds, and became an entrepreneur. I wouldn't say quite by accident, but it's not nearly as strategic as like my bio would give you the impression that it is. So to fast forward to today, so I'm the CEO and founder of UpLevel Solutions, as you mentioned, Daniela, and we are a managed VA service. What the hell does that mean? So we essentially take a lot of the guesswork out of having a VA coming on to support you, help you with your back-end admin work, help you with like the marketing execution stuff you don't want to be doing, client relations stuff, customer service stuff, getting links where there need to be, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. We'll get into more and more of that. So all of the, I guess, decidedly frustrating in many ways parts of the business that are in many ways unavoidable, that stuff that my team like lives on, right? They're like, give me it, give me all the crazy admin, like I want to do it, right? You should see what my team members like behind the scenes. They're hilarious and endearing, and they share wins on a regular basis. And some of their wins are things like, my client only has to check her email once a day, and she went down from checking her email 10 times a day. And we're like, yay! Like it's super exciting, right? So, and it's so funny. Sometimes some of our clients will say, I feel really bad for my VA because I'm basically just giving her all this shit that like I don't want to do. And I'm like, no, that's the whole point. You're doing it right, right? So our team lives on it. So about our team, I think the coolest thing about what we do, other than the fact that we work with so many different types of businesses, including a lot of course creators, actually, a lot of course creators, is that we're a social enterprise. And that's what really gets me out of bed in the morning. That's what gets me on a call on a Saturday. This is the stuff that I love. So as our company grows, as UpLevel grows, we're creating more and more opportunities for women and LGBTQ folks in the Philippines. And the Philippines is where our talent center is. A lot of these folks who are super brilliant, super talented, have been passed over by traditional employers just because of the way sort of the employment system and the culture is set up there, or culture has developed there, I should say. And these folks end up with careers with us. So, and in many cases, we give them this much of an opportunity and they do this much with it, right? In their communities, in the world, for themselves. And it's super exciting to see. And people will often say, so I've often given statements on like, you know, what does it mean to be hiring or to have an inclusive environment, particularly for LGBTQ plus folks in the Philippines, where most people are not out, particularly at work. And I think they're expecting some like big-hearted answer. And I've got lots of big-hearted answers, but like, it's really good fucking business. That's what it is. Yeah. Really good business, right? Because there's these brilliant folks who like so want to be engaged and are being passed over by traditional employers. And so I'm so thankful to like all of the clients that we have too, because they make our mission possible. So it's funny because sometimes people will look at my past. So I have a background in e-commerce and marketing, and I did some pretty exciting sort of sexy things. I ran an e-commerce company that was award-winning. I was a Shopify adopter long before Shopify was well known. And we sold sex toys and lingerie. And,
I remember that. That's when I met you. Yeah.
It's quite funny because people will say like, how did you go from something like so exciting to something so boring as admin work? And I say to them like, but wait, do you know what it's like to have someone do that admin work for you? It is fucking life-changing, right? It's so great. And I love the social impact side of what I do. So that's a little bit about us. The company's been around for, depending on how I tell the story, the company's been around for a decade because we've had folks with us for that long, but it wasn't really in its current configuration and like scalable model until about 3 years ago.
Oh, wow.
it was a little bit of an accidental business. I was trying to create a team to support my own endeavors. And I came up against all kinds of roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I built a team that not only supported my company, but now supports other people's companies.
I'm curious about with a VA, like when you decide that you need one.
Yeah, it's a great question. The earlier the better, generally speaking. And I would say that if you had no intention of ever working with my company too, right? It's agnostic to who you're going to work with. But the earlier the better, because it's really tricky when you desperately need the help, when you're completely over capacity. And that's when you decide to bring on the VA. It's much easier if you start earlier. We have a joke in our company that like our VAs are ready because we train them. They go through an extensive training process. Our clients, not usually. Right? So oftentimes our VAs are actually leading our clients, through process and helping to get them set up. And that's very normal too. But I always say too, if you can identify even just like one task that's repeated in your business on a weekly basis, that you're like, I would be happier if I never had to do this again, then great. And if you're really early on in your business, even looking at something where you're like, I'm going to try this for myself first for a few hours, see if it works for what I'm trying to do. So in early stage businesses, that can be researching leads, that can be setting up interviews potentially, that can be setting up, if like in the case of an ebook, etc., that could be like helping to set up some of the landing page or posting in Reddit or things like that to get some interest going. It can be researching Facebook groups that would be applicable, whatever the case is, sort of that background part, right? And saying, okay, is this something I'm going to need going forward? And even if I'm not, what are the things I could use like week by week that would allow me to focus on the bigger things that no one else is going to be able to think about? And with my company, and sometimes with freelancers too, like our minimum is 5 hours a week. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be like, oh my gosh, I'm not super prepared. Like I don't have all this work for someone to do right away. It's really like building a skill. You know how like everybody's done this, right? Myself included. You buy the piece of software and you're like, it's not super expensive, so I'm going to buy it. I'm just going to like hack away at it until like I figure out what I'm doing on this thing. It's kind of the same thing, except that it's easier because you're dealing with another human being who is going to actually interact with you, as opposed to like, you don't have to figure all this stuff out on your own. Our VAs, for example, so the process is always, there's an account briefing that happens behind the scenes that our clients don't see. And then there's a video call with the assistant and with a member of our onboarding team. And during that call, the assistant always asks like the first questions, like, okay, so what's the first thing we're going to work on together? Like they will even help to lead the conversation. And I was actually just doing, I was at an event yesterday, and I just happened to end up, there were breakout rooms, and I just happened to end up in a breakout room with one of UpLevel's clients. She's not someone I know super well, though I know of her. And she said, Katrina, I wish I'd done this sooner. This was way easier than I expected. And I feel like it was one piece of the business that I was just like, okay, I've got that. I can figure out how to scale that up later when I need to scale it up, right? So I guess to go back to your question, if you can identify something, anything in your company that makes sense for someone else to help you with, right? It's not a huge investment. We're not the cheapest. However, we do pay our people.
Yeah.
So something to keep in mind. There's definitely some ethical implications when you're choosing who you're going to work with. Not to say that working directly with a freelancer is bad. There's some great resources. Upwork is really, really popular. It can be very hit and miss. So a lot of people waste a lot of time kind of hiring the wrong people, and we handle all of that matchmaking on our side. We know our team really well. They've worked on internal assignments for us, even if they haven't worked on client work yet. We have a long onboarding and vetting process.
Can I say that when I read Tim Ferriss's book, that's when I first heard of VAs. When he talked about like having your VAs do market research for you, I got so excited. So I'm excited to hear you say that they love doing that, or they do that. Like,
yeah. And the cool thing is too, like our VAs are really well cross-trained. So It's rare to get a VA who well, no, they've all, I'm thinking about our roster right now, they've all worked on other projects for us.
Oh.
So like they've got all of this additional information and training and experience that they bring to the table. And moments of joy for me are when, so my direct assistant, her name's Daisy. Daniela, you've dealt with Daisy back and forth. She's awesome.
Yeah.
She's worked with us for many years. I think she's been with us for 4 years now. Anyway, she's hilariously funny and like keeps me in line. And there are many, many things that she does 100 times more efficiently than the way I would do them.
Oh, okay.
Because that's her focus, right? So, and it's amazing, those little time leaks, like the 5 minutes here, the 10 minutes there, and you're like, this doesn't take up that much time. If you start adjudicating, like actually measuring that stuff, sometimes it's horrifying, right? Like, you're like, whoa, like I thought I spent maybe 6 hours looking up hashtags and like posting my posts at the right time on Instagram. Turns out I do that for 20 hours a week. What am I doing with my life, right? Like this is probably not a great use of time. And Daisy does a bunch of stuff like that for me that, frankly, if I didn't have her, they wouldn't get done, or other things that can only be done by me wouldn't get done.
I didn't know they're Instagram trained too, because I'm not Instagram trained in any. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we always say, so we're not, so our VAs aren't experts, right? So they can lead the strategy in terms of how do you execute something. They're not going to lead the strategy in terms of like your business, which is why everyone, even if they're a friend of mine, even if they're someone I know really well, even if they're a business that I've coached, I used to do a lot of business coaching. I do very little now unless I've got an equity stake in the company, but with all of my coaching experience, even companies I've coached still have to go through our discovery call process, because sometimes we will have someone think that they really need a VA, and in fact, what they need is like a COO or some kind of specialist. In which case, then our team says, and it's Shirley, Lucy, and Chris that are on the team now on business development, and they will say like, you know what, like, thank you so much for thinking of us. This is not a good fit. Like, you're not going to be happy with having a VA do your 5-year marketing plan, right? This isn't a good use of a VA's time. Let us refer you to someone. Have any of you read Zone of Genius? Is that what it's called? No, I'm forgetting the name because it's been so long ago since I read it. Okay, I'll find the name of it, Daniela, so you can share it with everybody.
Yeah.
It's a good read. So basically, the premise is there are 4 zones. There's your zone of zone of genius, which is the stuff you do like breathing, right? You're just like, it's so easy to me. I love it. I feel good about it. I don't even realize I'm working. That's the stuff where like 12 hours go by and you're like, whoa, what time is it? Right? And you're so happy. You might be tired, but you're so happy. So that's the zone of genius stuff. There's zone of excellence stuff, which is what everyone tells you you're great at, but you're like, like, when somebody gives you a compliment, you're like, it's fine. Like, that's zone of excellence stuff, right? So like, I'm really good at writing PR pitches. Like, I'm super great at pitches, all that kind of stuff. Any kind of like convincing writing, I'm really good at it. Too bad I don't care for it. Like, I'm just like, it's fine. I will do it if I have to. If our copywriter is not available, I will do it, right? Then there's zone of competence, which is, you do it as well as most people, maybe better than about 50% of people, right? Cooking is like that for me. I'm a competent cook. I'm okay, right? I could make food. That's pretty much it. I am in no way going to be like, no one is ever going to be like, Katrina, you're an amazing cook. Like, that would be ridiculous, right? And if they're saying that to me, like, I know they need a favor or something, because that's like clearly not the case, right? They're just buttering me up. And then there's zone of incompetence, and everybody's got stuff in their zone of incompetence. What I think sets apart people who become more successful, and success is a weird thing. Success is however you define it. And so I'm ambivalent in terms of whether you define that as like lifestyle freedom, or if that's a financial goal, or if that's like fame or power, or, or just being happy. Like, all of those things, right, can be, and hopefully you want all of those things. All of those things can be considered success. But if you look at the people who get to be successful on their own terms faster, it's normally the people who recognize the fact that they're incompetent in certain areas, as we all are. Yeah. And to say, so I'm not doing that stuff. And in fact, as you move up the ladder and you think more like a CEO, right? And if you're the only person in your company, you are the de facto CEO, right? So as you start to think more like a CEO, to say, okay, I'm not going to do the zone of incompetence stuff. I'm not going to do the zone of competence stuff anymore, because there are at least 50% of the population that's better at that than I am, right? And then eventually you start moving away even from the zone of excellence stuff, right? So great example of that is we've got a client who is amazing at social media, but her company's getting big. And she doesn't need to be the one to actually be writing Instagram captions anymore. She likes it, and that's fun. However, it's not really that important to her company. And it's not stuff that she's like, I want to be known for Instagram. This like lights me up. I'm like delighted by this, right? She's like, yeah, I'm really good at it. It's kind of fun. I do it. And like her team's like, good job, good job. But at the end of the day, she needs to be in her zone of genius. And your zone of genius is where you're going to be able to move the needle the most. And the more time you can spend there, the better, whatever that is for you, right? And then that's where VAs can be really helpful, especially if you can get them to do the stuff that's in your zone of incompetence. If you do a brain dump, even with your VA, right? Like get on a video call and be like, I'm going to brain dump all the crap that's just like playing on my mind. I need you to keep track of it and start to categorize it for me and let me know what you think you could help me with. But in terms of setting up the marketing for a course, I know people who have so little established. They've got like their course and a terrible landing page. I'm giving bad business advice here, but just roll with me for a second. They've got a terrible landing page, but they've got some folks who took their course who are just like extreme evangelists for them. And so they just use that as their marketing, and they lean into creating more evangelists and having those people, talk about them in Facebook groups, having them talk about them on like Instagram lives or TikTok in this case, and things like that. So Clubhouse, which is the new one. There's so many different ways to build a business. So if you're doing something because you think you absolutely have to, because that's the only way to do it, I would challenge you to say, could you eliminate that altogether? How does this tie into VAs? The whole point of this exercise is to reconsider the way that you are going about your business and to look for efficiencies. And those efficiencies aren't just about how do I save time? It's also how do I save mental and emotional bandwidth? Because growing a business, Daniela actually makes it a lot easier, thank goodness. Daniela, I wish that you were where you were when I needed you specifically, because I made things really hard on myself, in particular because I was very inflexible with the way that I would go about certain things, because that's how I thought it had to be, right? Your business can be however you want it to be, right? Within reason. There's so many different ways to be doing pretty much every element of your business. Okay, so you've looked at a few things you could potentially eliminate, right? Did anyone come up with some good ones where you're like, why am I still doing this?
I came up with one where I thought, would I really hire a VA for this? Is scanning dating sites.
That's cool.
It takes up so much of my week, and I'm like, what can someone do this for me?
I'm actually serious that we absolutely have people, like especially clients of ours that are, they have a full-time assistant.
Yeah.
They have stuff like that. We have someone who has the VA look at their like fantasy sports picks. Right? I know nothing about that world. So like, anything I say is going to sound really bizarre because I just have no clue. But yeah, absolutely. Okay. I love that. That's a hilarious example. Is there anything on your list that you're like, I hate doing this? Why am I doing, like, this is so frustrating?
I do love most of what I'm doing, like 99% of it, but it's too much. I physically can't. It stops me from doing the things I really want to do.
Yes. Yep. Totally. That's the next thing. Okay. So okay, that's fine. We'll come back to it. My guess is you will eventually, it's going to happen to you like tomorrow or like Monday. You'll be like, oh yeah, I do this thing that I hate. Why am I doing this thing? Right? Like, like, oh, I have to reconcile some like freaking transactions for the accountant when I have 7 transactions in the entire bank account. Like, why do I have to do this? Right? That stuff can often be eliminated because with a simple conversation, right? You can say, I don't want to do this anymore to your accountant. And she says, oh, that's okay. You can just give me access to this thing. And you say, oh, great. I don't want to ever do that again. No, I don't have to. Right? So that's a great example of just being able to eliminate. Okay. Next thing you're going to do, How many hours per week do you think you spend on each of these activities?
Too many.
So what are the things you're spending the most amount of time on per week?
Email for me.
Yep. What kind of email?
Well, a lot of it is answering direct messages on my Facebook page, my business page, which is so annoying sometimes because there's a lot of people who are not really buyers, who will write you for who knows why and just ask you question after question, and then yeah.
Yep, love that. So a relatively easy solution there is to give a VA access, right? Yeah. To your business page. It's easy to revoke access to, it's no big deal. And have them look at the types of inquiries you've gotten before, how you've responded, and put together an FAQ. And you can either use that FAQ in the future or just have your assistant use it. So they can create some canned responses. You can also automate a lot of that too. How well that automation works, it depends how many outlier questions you have, I find. Like some of our clients have this set up really, really well, and then they just have their VA handle anything that goes beyond a certain point in the conversation. But in some cases, if you're like, all of these are slightly different, they couldn't use canned responses, then having a VA respond to those can be super helpful. And here's the thing, even if your VA just says, hi, I'm Daniela's direct assistant. I'm just jumping in here as we are fielding a lot of inquiries right now. The best way to get in touch with Daniela is actually via email. I'm going to flip this inquiry over to her, but could you give me your email address so she can reply there, right? Even something as simple as that can mean that you can breathe easily. So if you have like 3 days of intense work you do not want to be checking those, Facebook page messages. You have a VA that's even just responding to everyone with that exact same message, and then bringing to your attention things like, I don't know, something really exciting, or there's someone who is already part of the program who needs to get a hold of you and they can't get a hold of you for some reason. So having a human being go through those things can be hugely
and I would love for a VA to track my analytics in the Facebook ads. I try to go in when I can, but it'd be great to be right on top of that.
Yeah. Yep. And to pull them together into a report. So you have that report on a regular basis, and you can say, every Tuesday at 2:00, I'm going to review my analytics because my VA is going to do all of the work for me on Monday to pull all that stuff together. Absolutely. Because especially, and it's interesting, we work with so many creatives, and I kind of came from that background too. Like, we're so built to be overworked too, right? We're like, that's okay. I'm used to doing like 15-hour days. Like, I'm good. I'm fine, right? But that realistically is not necessary, nor in business is it actually helpful, because it's not a matter of the number of hours you put into a business. That's not how it works, right? It's the results. And I would say my biggest mistakes in business in the beginning, or as of late, I would say, have really been related to how tired I've been, and they're mistakes of fatigue. Even with the initial things in your business, and I'm not saying you have to have a VA, you don't, right? You can totally do all this yourself, but it is something to consider. Even with the initial research, so something that our VAs are really good at is, could you please look at all of the options for X, right? So let's say CRM system. I would like to pay no more than X per month, and I would like to know what's out there. Our VAs will like sit on software demos for you. They'll like condense the information. They'll take screenshots. They'll say, well, these seem to be the top 3. Here are 5 other opportunities. They'll do a Zoom call with you and like present what they found to you. I'm not going to pitch you on anything. They're just going to like pull all the information together. And then you can say, oh, you know what? Actually, I really like your top 3 and one of the other 5. So can you set up a software demo for me with these people to go through these things? So that's super, super common. Even in the business development world, which may or may not make sense to you, but the concept is still very applicable, in particular in course development. If you need like extensive, deep research on something, non-technical, but like things where you're like, I need to know like all of the people in my space who are doing this type of course, or I need to know how long are their courses? What's the price point? Like all of that kind of competitive research. I say competitive because sometimes they're not even really competitors. It's just like you're looking to them for inspiration, right? Getting all of that stuff together, I mean, you can spend the, whatever it is, 160 hours to do it yourself, right? But you got to start thinking about what is your time worth, and what are the things you can say, you know what, if I just moved this in the business, if I could just move the needle, I would launch faster, the course would be done faster, I can be filming videos for my course, or I can be creating the ebook, or I can be, you know, working through these things, and then I can just come to like a completed report and be like, okay, and now's my time to work on pricing, and here is my spreadsheet with the 150 like people in my space who are doing similar courses, and I could be like, well, okay, you know, it gives you a leg up in a lot of ways. The entrepreneurs that do well, right, are the ones that don't burn out. Like, a lot of people give up, right? So if you can find ways, even in the early stages, to say, okay, how can I problem solve and get myself out of the way, right? The sticking points in my business are places where I can't get myself out of the way, or I think I can't, right? And then I think through, I do these similar exercises, right? To say, okay, you know, how am I being the barrier? So then the next step is, okay, out of your list, is there anything that you could automate? So if you circled the things you can eliminate, what can you automate that you're currently doing manually? So let me give you some examples there. So there are a lot of things, for example, in your bookkeeping that could most likely be automated. So for example, if you have a monthly program and you don't have your members being automatically billed monthly, you have created work for yourself. Here's a really easy one. If you are forever going back and looking for some password that you need, please just use LastPass, right? Save yourself the time. And I do this for almost everything. And then the things that I don't do it for, I lose my shit because I can't remember the fucking password, right? So, and don't you love that like Apple gives you those like cryptic passages, like, I'm so secure, except when I need to access it, I can't remember what it is. So like automate that shit, right? Just like put it in like have a secure program, handle that stuff for you. By the way, that's also a little hack for you. If you need to give access to your VAs to anything that requires a password, you do it through LastPass. Why you can revoke access like that, it's no big deal. They never have your actual password. They have access to whatever you grant them via that program.
Oh, amazing.
So that's a really easy way to do that. Also, having like canned responses ready, right, is great. And then if you want to look at anything, you're like, I don't know how in the world I would ever automate something like X or Y, have a look at a tool called Zapier or Zapier. I actually don't know how you pronounce it. Zapier.
Yeah.
Highly recommended. My team knows how to use it a lot better than I do, to be perfectly honest. Because
that's good news. Because most of us work on Samcart, and Samcart integrates with Zapier. I call it Zapier.
Love it.
That's amazing. But I get stuck on it, so that's awesome.
Yeah, I have never even opened it, to be honest. So this is the funny thing too, is like I progress in my own company because I have so many assistants to support me. So somebody gave me an example. They were like, oh, what social media like posting aggregator do you use? And I was like, I believe we use Sprout Social only because I think I've seen the invoices. And they were like, oh, do you not log into it? I was like, oh, no. Like, I don't even have a login, right? So in any case, look for the things where you're like, you know what, this should be able to be solved with automation. And if you're not sure, right, so why don't we like underline those things, or just right beside them, automate, right, with a question mark. So give me some examples. What have you got on there where you're like, there's got to be a tech solution for this? Anyone?
Well, yeah, when I log students who register for my courses, I feel, because I do class lists and because I have all these courses running, so I feel like that could be automated probably.
And where do they get logged?
I type them into like a spreadsheet. every time I make a sale, I type it into a spread. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, hell no. Please don't ever do that again. Like yeah, that can definitely be automated. That's Zapier all the way. That's a Zap for sure. And then sometimes it can also be quasi automation. So this is what I like when somebody's like, I'm not very techie. I'm like, okay, but like, if you could pretend you were for a second, what do you think the app would do for you, right? And then either search for the app or tell your VA what you want the app to do and have your VA look for the app, right? There's something that does almost everything out there. You might see it and you might be like, too expensive for me, I don't want to do, but at least you know it exists, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes there's also like an interim kind of in between. I'll give you an example. So at UpLevel, we're constantly hiring new VAs and training them, as I mentioned earlier on. And I don't know why we thought this was a good idea. This is again one of those things where sometimes you look at your own stuff and you're like, oh, like this is what I would tell someone else who was running this business is so we can have up to 25 people, sometimes even more, on our initial training for VAs, right? Which I deliver actually. And then the rest is delivered by Mitchell on the team or someone else. But the initial one is me. And it's our boot camp. It's where I get to know everybody. And Mitchell kept telling me, like, make sure that you just take note of everybody that was there from beginning until the end. And I'm like, okay, that's right. So I do like a screenshot, right, with everybody's name on it. And like, then my assistant would send that to Mitchell. And I was like, wait, this is not effective. Instead, right, these are people who are doing training with my company, right? We don't charge them for any training. Like it's like hugely beneficial. I was like, wait, no. Instead, we created a Google form. And then we were like, before you end today, please fill out the Google form. Oh my goodness. Not even really automation, quasi-automation. So it doesn't have to be like a completely tech-related solution, but just look for those like points where you're like, I'm wasting some time on something and this seems very inefficient. There has to be like some kind of little step I can add or some kind of tool I can leverage. Last category. What have you got in there that you're like, okay, I can't eliminate this. I absolutely cannot automate this, or it'd be too expensive to automate this. I'll give you an example of too expensive. Too expensive was, I was looking at, I'm very specific in how I like my information about my company, how we look at KPIs, right? How we look at progress towards different goals. I can look differently in everybody's company, right? Everyone who runs a company or who has a side hustle or who freelances has a different way that they want to see information. There's a tool that does it. I'm not going to mention the tool because I'm not going to say anything super nice because it's really expensive. I was like, oh, this is a great tool. Like, this is what I need. This is going to put everything together. It's like a great display. I can manipulate the data. It's coming in from different sources, except that it was heinously expensive. Like, I was like, whoa, like that is like, need an investor to get that stuff, right? Like, I'm fairly established. My company's doing pretty well. It's just like, and my jaw dropped, right? I had like major sticker shock. And I was like, okay, yeah. Or I can pay somebody on the team to just compile that information for me. It is actually less expensive than paying for the software. That's one of the exceptions where, like, if you come up with something you're like, could be automated, incredibly expensive, or could be automated, but is going to be very difficult to automate. So last category, what out of that big long list can you delegate? Here's something to look at. If you can't eliminate it, you can't automate it. It doesn't fill you up. And you know it's important to your business, right? To either get your business off the ground, to launch, or to grow, right? Or to maintain it. Then could you delegate it? It doesn't necessarily have to be delegated to a VA. VAs are a really great, inexpensive resource, right? And if you work with a company like mine, we're able to help resolve a lot of those headaches that you would otherwise encounter hiring someone yourself. But just look at what of these things could you delegate? What could someone else do for you? You don't need to say what else would somebody do for you that they're going to do as well as you or better than you. Don't make that value judgment yet. Just look at what could you delegate. And if you can't find anything, you need to ask yourself why.
Yeah.
And then
Social media.
Perfect. That's a
Social
perfect
media
example.
posts. Yeah.
That's a perfect example. So, okay. So delegating social media posts. So put delegate beside there. And then because that's such a broad category, start breaking that down, right? So is it content development? Is it posting schedule? Is it getting it into a scheduler? Is it hashtags? Is it collaborations with other folks on social? Is it stimulating interaction, right? What are the things that you're currently doing? And what are the things that you're not doing that would be really helpful, but you don't have the time to do, right? Or the expertise to do. So then you start to say, okay, so, and sometimes what can happen is when we look at our delegate list, we're like, wow, that's like a lot of stuff to delegate. People fall into two camps. Wow, I could delegate everything. And now I'm overwhelmed by how much I could delegate, because now this seems like a totally new to-do list of like to do to delegate. Like that's crazy. Or you're in the other camp and you're like, I have nothing I can delegate. I have to do everything myself. And now I'm more overwhelmed than I've ever been in my life, right? Because you're like, now I'm realizing, oh, I have this list now. Thanks, Katrina. Like you fucked me up, because now I've got this big long list of stuff I've got to do. And I'm realizing how much I actually do in my company, and I'm more stressed. Be neither of these people. It's very easy to find some middle ground, right? So in the first example, where you've got all the things in the world to delegate, pick one. Just one. Just pick one thing. It can be the thing you don't really like doing. It could be the thing where you're like, I am not qualified to be doing this. I should not be doing it, right? And you can even pick, in the case of social media, pick one element, right? Because social media is such a big, broad category. Because it's true, when people say to me, like, I feel like I'm going to get really overwhelmed assigning these 52 tasks to my assistant, I was like, likewise, your assistant is going to get very overwhelmed by 52 tasks at once, right? Like, she's going to be like, oh, I'm happy to help you. Where would you like me to begin? And both of you will sort of look at each other like, I'm not sure where to go from here, right? So you don't need to even get it right. It's hard to get it wrong, right? You could be just kind of right, like, need to get this off my plate. It may take you a couple of attempts, right? You might be like, okay, I want all the graphics done in Canva, right? All the graphics for Instagram. I don't want to do that anymore. Great. You might give so little direction that your VA comes back and you're like, oh, like that's not really on brand for me. I don't like these things, whatever. Okay, so the next iteration is going to be better. And then eventually they're going to understand your brand and you're going to be more chill about it, right? Does that take some money and time? Yes. Does that take much money and time? No. Could you afford on an experiment to spend $80 US to eventually never have to do that again? I think so, right? You have to make that the value call is different for every business, right? But just in the same way where you're like, I'm curious about trying this piece of software. You try it, you're like, this is going to take me longer than I thought I was going to launch in a month. It's going to take me 3 months because I can't quite get it. Learning how to delegate is going to be very similar. Even if you've done it for someone else in the past. This is a weird thing. You can work for someone else. You can learn to delegate. You can be delegating to other teams. When it's your company, when it's your project, it feels different, right? And you think, I'm the only person on earth who's ever going to understand that. If that's true, you have to start to rethink about how your business is structured. Break it down into little parts, right? Okay, I'm going to fast forward. So what you do when you get your list of things to delegate, right? You pick one thing. If you're in the camp where you're like, there's nothing I could possibly delegate, right? Then you're going to pick one of those things you think you could never possibly delegate. You're going to put it in the center of a sheet, and you're just going to start writing all of the different components of it. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say it's getting a YouTube channel launched, right? You're going to be launch YouTube channel. It's going to be in the middle of your sheet. You're just going to write all of the things that are related to that. Look at other YouTube channels, take a YouTube course, learn how to video edit, and eventually things are going to come out where you're like, well, I don't need to do that part, right? So the thought exercise is super important. Cool. Once you have your list of things to delegate, then you say, okay, now I need to create some kind of process. Note, you do not have to have a process well thought out in order to start with a VA. You can just get on a call with a great VA. My company has great VAs. There are others out there too. Of course, my vote is for my own company. I'm not going to pretend it's not, but you want to jump on a video call and say, okay, let me do a screen share with you. Here's where I'm going with this. I don't even know how you can help me 100%. Can you note the steps that I'm doing so far? Right? That's one way. Another way, you create a Loom video. You should see my videos when I'm trying to explain something. They're hilarious because I don't do this stuff very often. I just made one the other day and I was like, so first you log in. Wait, what's my login? Daisy was on there too, right? My assistant. And then eventually I got there, but I was like, then you click, hang on, wait a minute. Like, oh, nope, that's not where you click. Like, it was just a disaster, right? But the assistant was working on that project, was like, it's good, I've got this. One, she just laughed for like the entire 10 minutes of this video, right? But then she put together a process, and then she showed the process to our director of marketing, who was like, yeah, but in your case, they might be showing the process to you. That's fine, right? It could be a shared document. So you don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to have an idea. And you have to be willing to like work on making it better by iteration, right? And if you are somebody who's super process oriented, you're like, I got my processes down, I know exactly what I need to do here, also great, right? You can be like, here's the process, please follow this process to a T, right? Okay, so that's my general exercise. I highly recommend you do that on a regular basis. And I would love to field any of your questions whatsoever about VAs in the last 10 minutes that we've got. VAs, delegation, scaling a company, anything I can help with.
Now, how about attrition, and how does that impact when that person has to offload? And you, again, we're not necessarily looking at, I'm not going to look at Daniela and say, oh, you can't work here anymore. I'm looking at you, Katrina, because it's UpLevel. What is your knowledge transfer rollover when something like that?
Great. I love this question. Okay, so first of all, we have really low attrition in our company. I know my competitors in the industry have a very kind of revolving door policy, but it's actually really hard to become an UpLevel assistant. So we interview, like our numbers were something like, I think on our last go round, we had 4,000 applications. We interviewed 80 people. Out of those 80 people, 25 started training. Out of the people who completed training, we had, how many people came out the other side? 7 or 8 people came out the other side. Out of those 7 or 8 people, they still had to actually work internally for the company before they were on a client account. So by the time they've made it all the way through, they're pretty dedicated. That being said, people are people, right? Like we don't own people. So, you know, they leave for whatever reason, just like any other company, you know, it's not normally that they've got a better opportunity. We actually pay much higher than standard at my company because our folks are in the Philippines, right? So the cost of living differential is in our favor, as well as the money conversion, right? Currency conversion. So it's not normally so much that, but sometimes it's like somebody's family business, they leave for that reason, they leave because of an illness reason. There's all kinds of reasons that somebody could leave, right? In that case, we're very, very good at helping to manage that behind the scenes. So we have a pretty extensive document about every client. So we call it the account report. I think the name's changed a few times, but account report, which has basically, if you have told your VA what type of pizza you like, it's on there, right? So it's a pretty extensive profile, and it also has all of the processes that they've created. And wherever possible, we actually do a really great handover. So the one VA will actually teach the other VA how to roll something out or how to work with you as a client. And then the one thing that's a bit repetitive is you have to do another video onboarding call with the new VA. That's an essential thing for us. So does it happen that people leave? For sure. I think we alleviate the headaches as much as possible. It's definitely easier than having a freelancer take off because we have information, right? That information is actually, they're required to be submitting it on a weekly basis. And people generally don't leave our company saying they don't, like they have any kind of bad blood. In fact, I don't remember the last time that happened. So hopefully that speaks to your question.
What is your process for getting me a person that can work to the kind of work that I need?
Well, the first thing you'd have to do we'd have to do a call with somebody on my team, Shirley, Lucy, or Chris, who may actually tell you, no, a VA can't do that. Not our VAs anyways. So it would depend, right? Fit is really, really important to us too. We don't go into situations where we don't feel like we could support you. Without having a close look at what that process looks like, I couldn't be able to tell you off the top of my head. Oftentimes where we're faced with that, so for example, we support several law firms, right? Those law firms are, one, they're regulated, obviously, but secondly, they have very specific ways of the way client files have to be dealt with, about how things are even, labeled, who gets what information when. And we can pass muster there. A lot of the times it's about figuring out the parts of the process of what you do that can be delegated out, right? That make things easier for you, so that you're not dealing with any of the repetitive stuff. And people say there's nothing repetitive in my business, but there often is, or you can make it in such a way where somebody can follow a process that helps to support you. But I'm also not like, I am in no way the type of person who's like, you need a VA to do everything in your company. Like, I think that's a cool experiment. And I have plans to actually create a company that's completely VA run like as a cool, just like fun experiment. But I'm also like, in some cases, yeah, it doesn't make sense to get a VA involved, right? You have to look at where you're going to see those economies in terms of time and money, and where you're going to see some company growth, right? So that'd be a great conversation to have with either Shirley, Lucy, or Chris on my team. There's if you want to book a call, and you can totally be just like a tire kicker, that's totally fine. We build relationships over time. So if you're just like, I'd like to delegate parts of this, but I'm not sure how, they're great people to chat with about that.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And Daniela, you've created something magical here. So I'm really proud of you.
Oh, thank you. It was very fast. So I wanted to, I want everyone to get their businesses launched. So I know the place I'm at. I definitely need to book a call, because I know that that's the place I'm at. I'm at scaling, but people are in the early stages. So we really appreciate your insight. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us too in the live.
Thanks so much. Bye everyone.
Bye-bye.